Hi everybody. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about coal versus gas forges, the advantages and disadvantages of each. And I'll go to my whiteboard where I've written down bullet points. It just makes it a lot easier for me to remember what I want to say. One other thing is that concerning a forge is that I'm going to reline my forge, and I purchased this refractory board. This is quite a large piece, and this is very, very high heat refractory board. I think something like 3,000 degrees Celsius, and I've used this before in my forge and find it very good. And my lining now is really in need of changing, so what I'll do is I'll in another video I'll show that process. So yeah, let me get to talking about coal versus gas, and hopefully you guys find this interesting, and for some people maybe it'll help them make a decision about which might be best for their situation. Alright, okay folks, so here's the breakdown. And before I begin, I just want to say that probably for the first 10 years or so of my blacksmithing, I used coal exclusively. And then after that I used both coal and gas. And then now, being that I live in the city, I use gas exclusively. I would like to go back to coal, but I'll explain why that's not possible where I live. So, and another thing is that regardless if you use coal or use gas, both generate CO2 and radiation. So you have to be very careful. If you are blacksmithing indoors, it has to be a well-ventilated area. It doesn't matter if it's a coal or a gas forge. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go. Coal, good points are on top, and the disadvantages or bad points are on the bottom. Coal, you can easily reach high temperatures. I used to use just a hand crank blower, and just with a few, once I was up, had the fire going, with just a few easy cranks, I could reach welding temperatures, no problem. The heat is localized, and what I mean by that is, right where the heat is, within the fire pot, the temperatures are extreme, but just going outside of that just a little bit, and you could even keep your hand above there with when the blower is not on. So that's very good in my opinion. The heat stays localized, and that has its advantages for when you're heating pieces as well. Quiet with an asterisk, and the reason I say I have the asterisk is because it depends on the type. Like I used a hand crank blower. Some people maybe use an electric blower, and that would be obviously a little bit more noisy. But in general, coal forge is almost always quieter than a gas forge. And a homemade setup is easy. Again, this depends on how complicated you want to make it. Like I said, there's different types of bellows. I had an old 100-year-old hand crank bellow that worked as well as the day it was made. And that was relatively simple. Just connect that, have an air source coming into your fire. An electric blower, similar. Maybe if you wanted to be more traditional and use a bellows, a pump bellows, then that would be much more complicated. So, but if you just wanted to get going and started, homemade coal setup would be easier than gas, in my opinion. And then gas, consistent temperature. So once you get up to your forging temperature, it should stay there. So that's a very nice thing about gas. It's easy to start and stop, much easier than a coal forge. Available everywhere, and this is probably a key for a lot of people. Where I am now in Taiwan, I can get propane anywhere. In America, in the States, you can get propane at most gas stations. Heating multiple pieces is easy. In a coal fire, depending on the shape of your forge, maybe it's not as easy to put in multiple pieces. So, but with a gas forge, it's easier to do multiple items, and no smoke. So this is also a key. Where I'm now, I can't use coal because I'm blacksmithing in a city. So gas is my only option. Maybe for the first 10 years or so, like I said, I used only coal. And then I transitioned to using both while I was still in the States. And now that I'm in Taiwan in a city, that's not really an option. It is if you get the right kind of coal, but that's a discussion for another time. But quickly I'll touch on that, is that for coal here, I just speaking about good blacksmithing coal, which would be called bituminous coal, which is a little bit softer coal. and it has enough impurities, enough sulfur in it to make it combust easily. So, yeah, that's that. But there's also something called forging coke, which is a kind of a processed coal, which has a lot of the impurities taken out of it. And once you get it going, you have to keep an air blast on it, but it burns very, very hot, and it has relatively no smoke. But it's not an easy product to get a hold of, and if you do, you probably have to buy in very large quantities. Okay, let's go now to the coal disadvantages. And right here is coal quality. So that can vary from region to region, and that can really affect your forging. Indoors, you need a flue. So remember, if you're operating indoors, regardless, you need good ventilation, but with a coal forge, you'll need a flue pipe and a hood to vent the smoke away so it doesn't just go anywhere. It's easy to destroy a workpiece. Sometimes if you're working, if you're not paying attention, you reach welding temperature so quickly that you could destroy your workpiece. Clinkers / dust. Clinkers form as you burn coal. Impurities in the coal start to meld together, and they start to constrict the airflow. So occasionally you'll have to pull clinkers out of your fire, and that kind of dust also is created as the coal, as the coal burns, it combusts, and you'll have a lot of dust left over. And fire management with an asterisk, and that also speaks a bit about clinkers. Fire management is not necessarily a disadvantage. In my opinion, it's also an art form for blacksmithing, knowing the fire and that it's a living thing and how you can maintain it and keep it running ideally. So, but fire management, for some people, they don't want to be bothered with that. They just want the forge to be on, with, say, for a gas forge, and they don't have to think about, pulling out clinkers, making sure the air is just right, and making sure that the air that they apply to their forge is what they need for the workpiece that they have in there. So, all right, and then we'll go to the disadvantages of gas. Loud. So, for gas forges, basically, there are two kinds. And also in gas, I'm just speaking about propane. I don't have any experience with natural gas or MAP gas or anything like that. The two forges would be atmospheric and forced air, which is also a blower type forge. A blower type is probably louder. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but the atmospheric, what it is there's a tiny orifice where the gas shoots into the forge, and as that shoots in, it draws in air from around it, and then that raises the temperature inside of the forge. So as that air gets sucked in, it makes that kind of a sucking sound. It can be very loud depending on what kind of forge you're using, how many burners, and what kind of pressure you're running at. Hard to forge weld, and this is something that I've had some problems with recently. In the past, I did my fair share of forge welding, but ever since I transitioned into gas, I've not really done any forge welding. And it's actually, for me, it was very inconsistent. So, something I didn't practice a whole lot of. But recently I wanted to make a video of forge welding tong in a special kind of a way to show you guys, but I was having all sorts of issues, so hopefully I'll be able to sort that out and then show you that. But typically, from my experience, compared with coal, it's much, much harder to reach forging temperatures, though it's not impossible. Scale can be inconsistent, and by this, if you don't have your forge tuned just right with the gas to oxygen mix, then sometimes scale will form in a strange way on your workpiece. And I've noticed that this can be bad sometimes if you're getting towards the end of finishing your piece and you want to have a nice consistent finish. Sometimes with gas, if your forge is not tuned right, it can be hard to achieve just the right finish. Homemade setup, not easy to tune right. So, and that goes back to what I just said about, the forge needs to be tuned up. The amount of gas coming in, the pressure that you're running, and how much air can get in if you're either forcing air in or you're using an atmospheric that sucks in air by itself. It's, in my experience, I've tried to make a homemade forge and it's just very unsuccessful. And then the last is the dragon's breath. And this term is used that a lot of people who use gas forges, there'll have to be an opening, 1 or 2 openings on your gas forge, and there'll be a fire that's shooting out of that. And so, you know, that definitely needs a lot of heat, so it's not easy to get close to a gas forge. Or sometimes, if you want to get small work pieces in and out, it can be difficult at times. So, yeah, so that's basically a breakdown of what I can think of offhand of the advantages and disadvantages of coal versus gas. So hopefully you find this interesting. You know, I've had a lot of people ask me, you know, probably guys who are just getting started about what they should choose, and hopefully this can give them some direction. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'm sorry about all the background noise, but you know, this is life in the big city. So until next time, see you guys later. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and check out my website, gstongs.com. Here's a still image of what I just discussed. Thanks.